Thanks for tuning in to the Women's Vibrancy Code, a podcast dedicated to helping women move from exhausted to energized, balance their hormones, and feeling turned on by their life, their lover, and themselves. I'm your host, Maraya Brown. I'm a Yale and functional medicine trained women's health expert, midwife, mom, keynote speaker, and self-made entrepreneur. I'm the founder of my signature program, the Women's Vibrancy Code. So sit back, relax, and let's chat about your energy, hormones, libido, and embracing your feminine power. Oh, and you might want to have pen and paper to take some notes on some of these episodes. This is going to be a fun conversation today. So I have JJ DiGeronimo with me, and we're talking about a journey of seeking. Is that what you're thinking, JJ?
That's what's coming forward right now. Let's see where it takes us.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to our conversation. So I took a little peek before we hopped on. We've never met before, but it looks like there's this nuance of business, but also energy and light healing. So I'm assuming that you have quite a story, and I would love to read your bio. For those of you that are listening, just really quick, you can see her bio in the description. But like, wow, featured in Forbes, the Wall Street Journal, Thrive Global, that alone, I'm guessing people will lean in. But I'm curious if you would just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what it is that you do. And I imagine there's some monumental moment that probably brought you from one place into a very different place. That's my assumption. Maybe I'm wrong, but I would love to hear from your words.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And yes, it has been quite a journey, to say the least, but not any different than most women. Most women are sort of programmed at a young age to strive and go and be. Some of us obviously have tumultuous childhoods, and that sends us in a totally different direction. But I think for many women, we encounter the world with big hopes and dreams. And some of us get married, and some of us work, and some of us are taken on completely different journeys. I would say that my journey was very masculine energy from an early age. I grew up with not a lot and was working from a very young age, which is why I decided to go into computers when I had the opportunity to get real training, because I had worked so many minimum wage jobs that I was certain that I was not going to spend my life working minimum wage. And I had to find sort of that on-ramp to get onto a different frequency. And that journey took me all over the place. And I did a lot of work out of Silicon Valley. But then, like most women, I've made other decisions similar to what we talked about. You know, I said, yes, I will spend my life with you. Yes, we can procreate. Yes, we can move to the suburbs. And through all those yeses, I lost a lot of myself, and I didn't realize it till months and months and even years later. And that had set me on another journey of really bringing women together, not to talk about work, but to talk about how they keep everything going in the right direction, or at least in a direction that inspires them. And that happened back in 2008. And little did I know when I brought those women together that that would be the basis for my first book, The Working Woman's GPS. And through that launch of information and knowledge sharing of women that were working to have it all and was trying to keep everything going, that really brought me to my second sort of lesson, which was, you know, a lot of women desire to have more influence and impact, but oftentimes don't know the difference of working in and on their career. And that really was the basis of the research that lasted about 3 years for my second book, Accelerate Your Impact. And I specifically named it that because most women don't desire to be in the C-suite, but most women want to have more impact or influence than they have today. And once I reached that second sort of plateau or milestone, I thought I would receive all of this like self-relief, self-pleasure, just like excitement, but then the work just continued. And I realized through a series of things that happened in my own life that even though I was helping and advocating for more women at more tables, I still had work to do on myself. And I was in my 40s at the time, and I realized I didn't really know who I was without the titles, without the salary, without the company name behind me. And I had cracks in my marriage. I had problems with my, like, things happening with my parents. Like, it just seemed like I had tower cards all over my life. And that is really when I started to show up for myself in by starting to just go to some classes. I started with tapping classes, and then I started meeting with different energy practitioners. And that really took me on an entire journey of working from the inside out.
I love it. There's so much that I'm hearing. When you say work at a young age, how young were you when you started working?
Oh, 11, 10, 11, 12, because I,
Yeah,
was babysitting, cleaning pools, washing
yeah.
windows, cleaning houses. I mean, I was doing just about everything. But by the time I was 18, I was exhausted.
I can relate. I look back, I've worked since sixth grade.
Yeah.
And how fascinating there's this transition of the search for achievement and the kind of churning to work, 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 and up to the point of creating what sounds like a community of women that were in C-suite. So, in Silicon Valley, great success, um, that people would assume would feel like success. But then this moment of saying, I don't actually feel fulfilled, and what do I desire? And what does this look like if I do it from the inside out? And so then what year was that where you started this journey of actually I'm going to focus on energy and emotional freedom technique? And it sounds like you dropped something around tarot cards. There was a big transition. Was it like light and dark or night and day where all your family and friends were going, wait, 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 where did JJ go? I don't recognize this
Oh,
person.
I would like it to be that. But for my 40th birthday, I decided to go to Sedona because I was having this inner turmoil within that was just so unsettling. And it had been going on for at least 3 years since
Mhm.
2012, the end of the Mayan calendar. I just felt so unsettled. And even though I was making great strides in my career as at executive levels, I just really felt so unsettled. So I booked a 40th birthday trip for myself after, and I write a lot about this in my third book, Seeking, about how hard it was to really carve out that space for myself, how guilty I felt, how much pressure I had at work, and even taking 3 days off seemed almost like not even possible. And that was really where I went to be like, am I crazy? Like, I'm having this sensation that I have to do something else, yet I'm exactly where I had hoped to be. And so my process was literally off the side of my desk for years. I didn't really leave my day job for over 5 years from really starting like this whole evolution. And I think for many of us, it can't be a huge leap into something. It really does have to be small baby steps, but you do have to lean into what I call your whispers. Like, I need something else. I need something that's not a book club, that doesn't meet in the community, that isn't a wine night. Like, I need something else to figure out like who I am and why I'm here.
I love it. Oh my gosh, I have so many questions. I'm like, you and I are going to be besties by the end of this. We need
I
to
love
talk
it.
outside of this. Okay, let me read her bio and then let me keep going on with questions. So, JJ, what does J and J stand for? Or is that truly your name?
Oh, yeah, it stands for Jennifer Jane.
Okay, but have you always gone by JJ?
Pretty much. Yeah. My brother
Yeah.
started calling me JJ when we were, under 5. So,
Okay.
yes.
All right. So JJ is an award-winning author and former tech industry leader. She empowers women with tried and tested strategies, mindfulness, and energetic practices to increase their impact and influence. Her work, like I said earlier, has been featured in Forbes, The Wall Street Journal, and Thrive Global through her 3 books, keynotes, and popular podcasts. Career Strategies for Women that Work and Together We Seek. It sounds like there's 2 different podcasts. Is that right?
Yes, I'm crazy. Yes, there is.
Okay. So JJ shares proven key findings that help women gain more seats at more tables. When you say more seats at more tables, what does that mean for you?
Oh gosh. Well, now that I'm 50, I've spent a lot of time in the business world. And even though they speak about, bringing more women up and having more diverse talent at the tables, that doesn't always happen. And it's really, I've learned through all my research that it's really about leaning in, at 60% rather than waiting to 100%, and recognizing that we all have self-doubt, all of us, even I do. After all these years of the work I've been doing, I still doubt myself as people are walking in the door for that retreat, or I'm starting to do, a new initiative, I'm like, who do you think you are? I say that to myself more than I like to admit. But for many of us, we need to push past those voices and get our voices heard at tables because the world is incredibly lopsided right now. I mean, there's so much masculine energy. And as you know, we have both masculine and feminine, but the world is primarily masculine in the workforce. And I think there could be a lot more value of having a little more balance at tables that are making pretty strategic and instrumental decisions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And so now you've left your corporate former career completely?
I have left it. Yes.
Wow, very cool. And so now you have three books, you
Mm.
keynote speak, you have podcasts. Do you host your own retreats or do you generally come into others' retreats?
I generally host my own retreats. I've done a couple visits for others, but primarily my own retreats, which is a story in itself because I would never have thought I would be a retreat leader, not going to any retreats before I led them. But I feel like I get so many whispers of things I should be doing. And that whisper came to me as take the women outside because
Mm,
most of my speaking is in conference rooms. So you could see a lot of women. I could see a lot of women from my viewpoint of being in front, like almost sitting outside their body. Like they've been brought so much into the masculine workforce, they have forgot about their intuition and their knowing and their grounding to Gaia and really just being part of this flow of energy that really allows us to use our innate knowing to move through
yep,
life. And we've been
yep.
conditioned to move out of that energy into the
Mhm.
masculine. And then we have been trained to believe that that is what success looks like.
Right. So, and particularly the women that are playing executive C-suite roles in like really in that working world that is so masculine, it's almost like if you drench yourself in that long enough, you forget that you're someone different or something different. And so what I'm hearing is you could almost see it with as you're speaking, you could see it in them that here are these women that have so much power within them and so much potential, especially when we allow both feminine and masculine to be expressed, both push and pull to be expressed, both inside and outside to be expressed. And you were saying, here you are, I see you existing in a masculine space and forgetting that there's a whole nother piece here. And so it sounds like you then became called to help them see it, help them express it.
Yeah, so I think, after all the work I've done, I've probably met with about, well, now it's probably 100 energy practitioners or more. And I'm not expecting everyone else to do that. In fact, in the book Seeking, I've included every book I've read, every energy practitioner I visited, every YouTube video I watched during these times that I really had to flush out my relationship of things that were happening inside my body. So my relationship with money, my relationship with my mother, my leaning into perfectionism as a shield to protect myself. And what does that look like? And so I think for many of us, like we hide behind so many things because we are trying to fit in.
Mm. Huh, we hide behind so many things because we're trying to fit in until I'm guessing you can relate to this. There is a big thing that changes for women in their 40s. And what I see is it really starts building at 40, and then there's this crux. There's this time of transition, generally around 45, as we are in a chapter of transition. I think of it as the two bookends, this perimenopause time and puberty time. And in perimenopause, there's the new fierceness that comes out. There's the time where we go, am I happy with the life that I'm living? Do I want to continue what I've created? And there's a new unapologetic fierceness that comes out and a desire to do things differently. And average age of menopause is 51. And so I'm guessing a large part of this is you kind of really coming to life and allowing yourself to go, no, 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 no. No more doing for the sake of what was expected of me or all the things that shoulda, woulda, coulda, and success. I actually want to feel fully expressed and content. Would you say that you've arrived?
Well, I love that. I love that bookends. I also would like to layer onto that. So, if you know anything about birth charts, which I studied for 3 years during the pandemic, because I feel like birth charts for me were really the can opener to help me understand who I am and my real work in the world. And for many of us, it's the same time we go through the Chiron return. And the Chiron return is where you basically work through the wounds of your soul that are holding you back. And so, right around the same time we're going through perimenopause and potentially menopause, we are breaking out of something that has been holding us down or feeling or allowing us to feel less than. And I think you see a lot of women as you experience in your retreats and the work that you're doing of women saying, you know what, I'm ready, or I don't care how it looks anymore, or like, gosh, I just need to do it. And I feel
Mhm.
like having people around more women that say these things, like, yes, you're going to have self doubt. No, you're never going to be 100% ready. And yes, the world needs you, often gives a lot of women permission to lean into something that they have been sitting on or sitting with for years.
Mhm. To be fully expressed. And did you stay in the marriage?
I did. Yeah,
Yeah.
I did. It has been one of my growth opportunities. It
Hmm.
has really been stretching me because a lot of what my husband puts me through in the sense of like growth opportunities, it started with my father. And so really learning how to, I'm actually working a lot with Esther Hicks in the sense of like what happens outside you is actually happening within you. And so for me, it's been a really great experience to not let things, I'm obviously highly sensitive as you are too, but like sometimes we're highly sensitive and people around us like set us off. And so how do I pull that back to ground myself and let myself be settled within so that my outside doesn't interrupt my inside?
Hmm.
And I think it's been amazing because I've grown so much through the relationship without him really even realizing it in some respects. Because what he does is not horrible. It's more of like what my soul had been conditioned to and the lessons I needed to work through.
Hmm.
So I'm not an advocate saying you should always stay by no means, but I would say that in my situation, it's been such a growth opportunity for me to really trust myself and really work through the ability to recognize that what happens within happens without. And the only way you can change the out is to change the inside.
Hmm. Yeah. I say, I often say it is first inside, then outside. But
Which is
also, what I'm hearing is, and my words are, I see the outside as a reflection of the inside. So, yesterday as an example, I was driving home the kids from jujitsu, and there were some kids in the middle of the road, young teenage. It was like maybe I'm guessing like a 12-year-old and 16-year-old just walking in the middle of the road. I'm driving with my big Sequoia behind them, and they're like oblivious in the middle of the road. And finally, I would say a good 2 minutes they turn around and notice, and it was like, wow, girls, you're in the middle of the road. There are cars. And I put my window down and I said what felt like very lovingly, you that's intense. You're in the middle of the road and there's big cars. Are you aware that I was here? And the younger one said, "Oh my gosh, thank you so much." And the older one yelled at me, called me a bitch. Um, it was intense to feel that energy, and it was shocking to my nervous system. And I've got my 6-year-old in the back, so I'm rolling the window up, and I was on my way home going, like there's these moments right now where I feel like there's patterns where I go out in the world and I'm feeling a little bit of tension, this vibration out in the world that just feels like
yeah.
sometimes people are about to pop. There's an agitation. And right now we're first day of school, and today is the anniversary of the fires that took out 2 towns north of me. And so there's a lot here in my geography that I feel. Um, but I also feel like it's a recovery from the pandemic. And I mean, there's so
Yeah.
many thoughts there. But then I also have to say, okay, if this is coming into my reality, where is it really a reflection of what's happening within me?
Hmm.
And how much why am I choosing to pick that up why am I choosing to see that piece when there's also the flip side, right? There's always the law of opposites in effect.
Like
And
how
there's
amazing those girls are, like so just like in their own world, being like not even recognizing what else is happening. I mean, when does that ever happen?
right. And here we are in a town where ultimately they are safe. And ultimately, there are people in the world that are just as compassionate and loving and settled and grounded. And so, what I'm hearing is you allowed this journey of changing the inside, knowing that the outside that was being reflected back would also change. Um, does your marriage feel different today than it did 5, 10 years ago?
Yeah, and I think a lot of it has to do with myself. Like I like myself more. When I got married, I was a high producer. I was traveling every week. I had access to a lot of stuff. I had an amazing experiences that I thought at the time. And so, like, I believe like some of the reasons my husband and I got together is because of the life we created. But then I've been shifting since for almost 10, 15 years now. And I've been shifting, which kind of started when I first had my kids, and then the women's group and the first book, the second book. I mean, it's been about 12 or 13 years I've shifted. And I struggled to still like myself. And even though I had these great points, I really have had to do a lot of work on really being satisfied with where I am in my journey, because
Mhm.
I oftentimes want to get there. And I can't even tell you where there is, but it's not here. And I think for many of myself and people that I talk to, like we are satisfied with ourselves when we have something that we've been aspiring for, we get to a certain milestone or something happens. And I've really had to do a lot of work on just being satisfied, like right here without all those things.
Mhm.
And through that self work, a lot of different things have come my way that were much bigger than I could ever have imagined for myself.
Right. So, what I'm hearing is rather than the satisfaction coming from career achievement and money and moving the goalpost and another book and a marriage that seems perfect to those looking from the outside in, that there's a transition to success and satisfaction comes from how I be and how I look in the mirror and how I feel about myself.
Very much so. And I feel like my shifting has shifted my husband too. And now we're on a different journey together. Gary Zuvak talks about in The Seat of the Soul, like a spiritual partnership. Like I was on my spiritual journey and it took him a while, I guess, to like start to be on it with me too. A while, meaning, a couple of years. I mean, it wasn't decades. But now we're on a totally different journey together. So we had to go through the shift from being like marriage partners to spiritual partners. And sometimes some people shift before others.
Have you read Universal Human?
I've not, is that his newest one?
No, I
I'm gonna read
actually I
it.
think it is his newest. So Gary, for those of you listening, Gary Zukov. For my listeners, so Gary Zukov is a very dear friend. He was actually at our house yesterday.
Oh my
Um,
gosh. Oh, I know. And Linda, I mean, I feel like I know. So I've written about him in a lot of my books
yeah,
because I just love him. I love his work. And I feel like the love he shares is unbelievable. That is amazing.
yeah. So Seed of the Soul and then Heart of the Soul. Oh
Yes.
my gosh! But when you
Yes.
talk about
Seed of the
spiritual
soul.
heart, yeah, well, Seed of the Soul, but Heart of the Soul as well.
Yes.
Um,
But the book I'm referring to is talks about Seed of the Soul that has the spiritual partnership that he talks about his evolution with Linda, right?
well,
Yes.
Universal Human is what really talks about spiritual partnership. So
Yay.
that's why
I
I
wrote
brought
it
it up.
down.
Yeah, I think you might enjoy it. Um, anyway,
Talk about like separation and the fact that you were with Gary yesterday. Like that is just mind blowing.
yeah,
I
there's a
want Gary to come and do a workshop in Vermilion because the universe has granted me this amazing estate that I believe is a natural vortex that is filled with pyramids. And I would love to come do like a loves because the land is so tribal and it's just like I've thought about him about coming and do so maybe the two of you could come.
yeah, who knows? He actually was at my last retreat, so he facilitated a
Um,
session at the last women's retreat. We don't talk about it a whole lot, and the videographer and photographer weren't there because he and Linda really made it a point to never be like specifically associated with any other business or organization, but talk about love and intuition. And he's just, I love that you brought him up because he's a big part of my life. I have a lot of love
Mm.
for him. So as I've been listening to this conversation, I imagine a lot of this is around frequency and you shifting your frequency or elevating your frequency, and then that frequency shift within changes that which you see and that which becomes attracted to you, as well as your marriage frequency kind of shifting. But what I'm hearing is you really feel like it's because you first focused on changing within you. So I'm curious if you would speak a little bit, and I'm making an assumption here, maybe this doesn't resonate with you at all, but if you speak a little bit to how do you see frequency and
Mhm.
how we can do the inner work to raise our frequency.
This is truly one of my favorite questions because I feel like frequency, it all comes down to frequency. That's how I feel. People say it all comes down to energy, but I believe it all comes down to frequency in the sense of what frequency are you at and what frequency, do you aspire to be at to create or manifest the life you desire. And, coming from a tech background, FM radio is frequency modulation. So it's very easy to kind of get an assessment like, are you at 89.7, 92.1, 99.4, 102.7, whatever you're at. It doesn't matter where you're at, but just kind of knowing where you're at. And there's really specific things you do. And I go into all of this in all of my books indirectly, and then obviously within Seeking incredibly directly. But the idea is that how you move through the world and the energy you have in doing so, not just when you're having a great time, but the days you're not doing so great too, or the days you're coming out of a meeting that really didn't inspire you, or maybe you said something that you're not really happy about, or someone said something to you. Those are the times because everything sort of averages out. And so frequency is sort of how do you move through the world, at what energy level or what radio station do you move through the world at? And back in 2010, I was in the wrong job. I had very young kids. I had a super demanding schedule, and I was in a mud puddle. I was at a very low frequency because I was trying to keep everything going that didn't really jive with me, but I didn't want to let anyone down. And so I was attracting a lot of people that were also in the mud puddle. And it wasn't until that I had talked to a couple women in my women's group back then that was like, you need to really kind of read different things and watch different things. And I was like, okay, I can do that. So I really turned my phone into a learning device. So, I listen to books all the time. I watch YouTube videos. And over a decade, a little bit more than a decade, I've been able to shift my frequency pretty consistently over the last decade. And I would say it really comes down to three things. It comes down to what I watch and pay attention to, right? What I put in my body and how I feel about it, whether it's a conversation, whether it's, food, like what I decide to engage in. Am I going to the right meetings? Is it things I really want to do, or am I doing it because I think I should? And number three, which is by far the most important, is how not only do I talk to myself, but how do I talk to others? Even if you don't say it out loud. So what are you saying to yourself on a regular basis? And then how do you move through the planet? Like, are you commenting at everybody that crossed your path? Like, why are they wearing that? That's ridiculous. Who is that? What are they doing that for? Like, it's really about mining your conversation within, whether or not it leaves your body. Because honestly, that conversation cultivates action, cultivates behavior, and can take you out of your frequency so incredibly quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like now, if I pay attention to how I talk to myself, what I say about others, what I put into my body, and what I watch and listen to, I can be living in a frequency that is incredibly blissful. And guess what? It brings other blissful people to me too. And
Love
just
it.
like our conversation, like we wouldn't be in this conversation if we didn't have similar frequency. And
Mm-hmm.
I feel like the only thing you really have in life is your time, which is still subjective, but how much time you have to move through life. But two, what frequency are you resonating at, and what frequency do you want to be at? And how do you make sure you're working within that?
Yeah.
Because and my life is much more about observation now. So I'm just observing all the time. without trying, without judgment, like just observing. So I'm a lot quieter now than I've ever been in my life
Mhm.
outside of these conversations because I'm just watching. And I'm like watching to see, like, for example, this morning I did my first cold plunge, which is a whole story in itself because I was not doing a cold plunge when I left the house.
Mhm.
And, but the universe has other plans. Like, that's what I'm, but I'm driving home on a street that I've only been on probably 2 or 3 times I've lived in this town. I was 30 minutes from my house. So I was way off, but I have seen the word Stonehenge twice in 3 days. Like, why is the universe telling you about Stonehenge, right? In the UK? Why am I seeing that? So I'll be curious to see like how that unfolds. But even like how I ended up where I was today, it was not really what I had planned to do, but I really feel like I am an observer and a participant on what the universe is trying to show me.
Mhm. Yeah, the big thing that I hear is if what I'm wanting to listen to is 102.7, but I've set my FM to 99.9 and I'm like, I want to listen to hip hop. Why am I hearing radio country? Well, it's like, well, all you got to do is shift the dial. Tune into a different station. And one of the things that I talk about that I'm hearing from you is to be aware of what comes in and out of my eyes, my mouth, and my heart. So then the
Mm,
question is, how do we change the frequency? We start paying attention to these three things that you mentioned with how am I speaking to myself? How am I speaking to others? What am I paying attention to? What communities am I surrounding myself with, right? What am I eating? How do I actively, could be something as simple as just change the radio station, change the frequency. And now all of a sudden, rather than listening to country, I'm hearing my hip hop and that's what I want to hear.
right. And you can do this. So the easiest way to change your frequency is having gratitude. And as
Mhm.
goofy as that sounds, it really is an easy way because it makes you focus on things that are positive, things that enlighten you, things you're excited about. And I really go through my whole day with gratitude. So when I'm going, even on I'm glad I have gas. I'm glad that there's no traffic. Oh my gosh, I get to meet this person. If I'm feeling like struggling in my office, I go outside on my porch and I sit there and wait till I can notice what are 20 things I can notice that I may or may not have seen the last time I was outside, but what do I see right now? And it may be, what do I hear? What do I taste? Can I, smell? I think we have to really ground ourselves in the present moment to really have gratitude. And once we get on this gratitude path, then it's a lot easier to change our frequency. And I feel like I had to go through intense mindfulness training to do that. You might not have to, whoever's listening, but I was a very A++ player. I really pride myself on getting a lot of stuff done at the highest capacity. And it was really hard for me to be in the present moment because I was always planning for the future or reflecting on the past. And I had to break that cycle. So for that, I followed John Kabat-Zinn's mindfulness training.
I don't know that. John Kabat-Zinn's.
Yep.
Huh.
So
Um,
he started the mindfulness practice for not MIT, but MIT, no, something up in Massachusetts. I think it is MIT actually.
okay.
Yeah.
And for those of you listening in the Women's Vibrancy Code podcast regarding gratitude, you might want to go back and listen to when I interviewed Tony Child. I don't know if you're familiar, JJ, with Tony Child's work, but he runs Gratishift and Elevate something rather. But his work is all around gratitude, potent, powerful stuff. Who else? So I've heard John Kabat-Zinn's, I think you said, Gary Zukov. Your energy feels very reminiscent of Tracy Litt. Do you listen or follow Tracy Litt at all?
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
I think you would enjoy Tracy.
I'm gonna
Who
write
have
that
been
down.
some, yeah, and who have been some of your teachers? Who are the stations that you tune into? I've heard Esther Hicks.
Oh
Who
yeah,
else?
Esther Hicks. Yep,
Yeah.
I do a lot of Steve Noble. I do a lot of his meditations on YouTube. Those are crazy powerful. I listen to probably one a day, sometimes multiple. And for those of you that might be going through the shift of life, you wake up a lot of times at 1, 2, 3 in the morning. Great time to turn on a meditation. I have my phone always nearby. I have it already like ready on YouTube to go. And I put on a Steve Noble meditation and I end up generally falling back to sleep, which is, I know, not easy for a lot of women. But I'm going this weekend. You've kind of hit me at a time where I'm like really in the spiritual just kind of journey this week because I feel like my kids are going back to school and now it's a little bit of time to like reconnect with myself in a way that I haven't had the time to do. And so I'm heading to Omega Institute on Friday. And one of my favorite authors and Oracle card creators is Rebecca Campbell. And she's
Okay.
going to be in there from the UK. And so I saw her about 2016, actually. I saw her at Omega then. So I'm actually bringing my mom this time, which for
Wow.
anybody who finds the book Seeking, you know, I write 3 chapters on your relationship with your mother because so many
Mm.
women that I work with, there's always something about the mother. And my mom read the book, and I did not give her any preview chapters because of a lot of reasons, but we are going to Omega together, which I don't know if would have happened had I not worked through my mother stories and she worked through her mother. I think that the book definitely has a frequency, and it really kind of forces you to gently work through things that may be holding you back.
Mm. And I don't know about you, but I feel like having daughters, it's a
Mm.
quick reflection and mirror to work through mother bond and mother wounding stuff. I definitely see myself and go, more reflection, more compassion, more awareness, and also, wow, what a journey it is. Would you tell the
Mm.
listeners what is Omega? Where is Omega for those that aren't familiar?
Omega Institute is in upstate New York, and it is a spiritual community. They farm the land. All the food they serve is what they grow on the land, and they bring in spiritual teachers. I know Gary's been there, and many of the other spiritual teachers I've talked about have been there. They have all kinds of programming, and you can go for a weekend or a week, and it's pretty simple living, but it really is about energy, alignment, awakening, inspiration, empowerment is kind of the words that come to mind when I think about the Omega Institute in New York.
Mhm, mhm. And so there's a lot that we've covered. It sounds like 3 books. I imagine that that would probably be something you'd probably encourage all of the listeners to read. Is there one in particular that you would encourage people to start with?
Well, I mean, Seeking for me, and especially for your listeners that are on a spiritual journey of their own, is really the book that, I mean, you can check out the reviews on Amazon. I mean, those are all legitimate reviews, but what I have seen is it has a frequency. So if it attracts you, that's kind of exciting. But a lot of women have made shifts because of the book. So it's things they've been sitting on or thinking about. But I love it because it's these 74 key findings that have come kind of to the forefront at the end. I worked with my friend Michelle, who's not that far from you. She's in California. She has these great retreats at Mount Shasta. But I worked with her on the idea of 74 because that was the number that kept coming to me was 74. And I think for many of us, numerology, we might not pay attention to numerology, but the number 74, really talks about letting go of our conditioning. And then when you add the 7 plus the 4, you get the 11. And it reminds us of our knowing and intuition with a powerful connection with the energies of the universe. And then 1 plus 1 is 2. And it's the spiritual number of partnership with the universe. And so I feel like this book for me has been really it's been my way of not only sharing all the things that I've had to learn to shift my frequency, but it really has all the lessons and kind of frequencies that the universe has teamed with me on to put together for women to create a bridge from that super masculine energy over to like more balancing of their knowing and wisdom with that action-based energy.
Mm. So you mentioned Mount Shasta. That's an hour from me. We were just there last weekend, and it's a special place. Have you gone to a retreat there?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So Michelle, she's amazing. She's having a retreat there in a couple of weeks, and I highly recommend it because I really I've never been, also been to Lake, is it Lake Crate in Oregon? That's a pretty spiritual place
Crater
too.
Lake. Yeah, Crater
Yes,
Lake.
that is crazy, wild, spiritual, and obviously Mount Shasta. So whatever's calling you, I think retreats are an amazing thing to get into. You host incredible retreats because it's a framework you can go into and get as much or as little as you want with not a ton of effort outside of your investment and time. And I think for a lot of women, it's a safe place to attend a retreat because it gives you glimpses of things either through your own journey or watching other people. And I just highly encourage retreats for women because
Mhm.
they often are very, very safe spaces to explore who you really are and why you're here.
I'm in total agreement. All the retreats that I've hosted have been here in Ashland, Oregon, which is also, I don't know if you got to come to Ashland. It's a very, very special place. Um, and I've actually been looking to do one where we go to spend time in Mount Shasta or possibly host the next one in Mount Shasta itself. It's a special place, but retreats in general, it's like I feel like the transformation that we can go through is on steroids. And particularly right now, I don't know about you, but post 2020, 2021, 2022, and what that looked like for so many people, it feels like right now there is a longing to be together in person. And it
Yes.
feels like a really important thing for us to be doing, and for women like you and I that are called to host and create the container and hold the container for women to gather together and look one another in our eyes and hug heart to heart and dance together and cry together and go through the transformation, feeling each other's energetic vibration, not just over Zoom. It feels so important right now.
It really does. And like that whole situation was no accident, in my opinion. And like we were forced to be pulled apart only so that we would come back together. And I think women are really leaning into that more than ever, recognizing like they need to be connected with other women differently than they have in the past.
Yeah.
Even though sometimes our soul makes us nervous about doing that because of some of the things that we've gone through together. But I feel like if you've chosen to be on the planet right now and you are somebody that feels like a retreat or a book or even a class is calling you, I would just really encourage you to lean into that and really allow you to sidestep the things that you don't, why it can't happen, right? I don't have the money. I don't have the time off. I don't have the support. Like the universe will provide for you, but you first have to lean in.
Hmm. And there are really some legitimate, beautiful containers that are created. Um, we've talked about so many different things. So obviously anyone can buy your book, but it sounds like for the women that come into your community, your retreats, I don't know if you do like one-on-one coaching, but are most of those women executive, C-suite, kind of really driven career women? Is that kind of what I'm picking up here?
Well, funny enough, as I was leaving Mount Shasta, I'm driving for a red eye back to the East Coast, and I left Mount Shasta, and I've got that 3 hour drive ahead of me, and I'm looking at the mountain in my rearview mirror. And as I'm leaving, I get the message, bring the mystics together. And
Hmm.
I'm like, that's the wrong car. That's probably the car in front of me or the car behind me. Like, who bring the mystics together? Like, what the heck? And so I was like, yeah, I don't think so. So I'm driving. And this happens to me. And this has happened to me 4 or 5 times in my life where I get these messages like bring the women together outside, which now, have been retreats. So I heard another time on my way. And within like 6, 7 months, I had a community started online. And you would think it is all these business women that I have been so closely connected to for over a decade, but it's the mystics. So I'm bringing the mystics together to share their stories because I believe it is the energy practitioners, it is the leaders, the retreat leaders, it is the authors, which is another thing that I'm working on right now is helping get more authors published. It's those women that are leading in those capacities that we are working together now to share energies, share ideas, really just come together to support each other because these are how we're going to help more women and how we are really going to help balance the energy of the masculine and feminine over the next 100 years or so. So although I love the businesswomen and many of them have tapped in, it really is the mystics that are now coming that are looking for that support and partnership and collaboration.
Mhm. And it sounds like it's specifically the mystics that know that they're mystics. Like there's probably people listening that are saying, "Well, I think I might have some mystic within me, but I don't really know. And what does that look like?" So it sounds like it's really the mystics that already have deeply rooted knowing that they are mystics and they want to group together and do their work cumulatively.
Yeah, I would would say there are definitely mystics that know for sure, but there's a lot of women that are intrigued by different practices that are just coming to learn. And I would say what is calling you is generally similar frequency. And they often say too, like people that we really admire, look up to, watch, read about, like you often have something that they have too. And that's why you're sort of mirroring and attracted to that energy. So if you're asking yourself, I think I might be a mystic, I'm not sure. I'd probably say you are, because who has that discussion unless there is a glimpse of that within?
Hmm. You and I have a lot to talk about.
So I guess we do.
Any other parting words, anything that feels important to say that you haven't already said? Some are watching live in Facebook, but then also for the podcast for the Women's Vibrancy Code. For those of you listening in the podcast, I appreciate you. Thank you for chiming in and listening. And JJ, anything that you would say to those that are listening?
Wherever you are right now in your journey is exactly where you're supposed to be. And I feel like I had heard that in the past, and I sometimes didn't believe it. I thought, well, what does this have to do with it sometimes? But now looking back on the last 50 years, things that I did at 16 and at 21 and 32 and 44 all have a place in where I am right now in my journey. And I think if somebody would have shown me a video of sort of how this was going to unfold, I would have never believed it because it is so much bigger than I could have ever imagined. And I had to go through those tower cards. I had to go to Sedona and like pry it out and be like, why do I feel so unsettled? I feel like when you have something you're working towards, sometimes all the pieces don't make any sense, but give yourself grace for where you are right now and trust that there is a place for it in the bigger picture ahead.
I love it. I often say, I'm guessing you relate to this. Life is not happening to me, it's happening for me and by me. And of course it's divine. And tarot cards, that's one of the tarot cards, right? I don't know tarot very well. Is that
It
right?
is, yeah. The
Yeah.
tower card, yeah. Most
Yeah.
people don't want to see that card because they think it's the end, but really it might be just the end of that chapter of your life.
Okay. And so when you speak to tower card, it's really those monumental moments in the trajectory of your life where it felt like things were falling down or ending. And you've been able to see those as blessings. And of course, to look back and go, of course, all of those moments happened. And of course, there was the twists and turns and divergence that I didn't expect, but it's all divine and how perfect that it all came together with who I am and where I am right now in my life.
Very much so. And so I would say just try to work to be in the moment. Pay attention to what the universe is trying to tell you. Is it through a street sign? Is it through a phone call? Is it through an invitation? Like the universe is here to help you, but oftentimes if you're not in the present moment, it's hard to see it and you're really not meant to do it by yourself. So it
Mhm.
really is advantageous to sort of get in flow with what's happening around you and using that as a clue book to kind of what is ahead for you.
So good. And there's no coincidences. Well, JJ, thank you so much for your time and for what you're doing in the world and how you're bringing mystics together to raise their frequency and
Mhm.
illuminate their path and bring in past leaders and teachers and mystics and spiritual guides to elevate the next version of what we're all co-creating together. So I really appreciate you and the work that you're doing. Thank you for your time today. I'm sure all the listeners are grateful. I'll make sure in the show notes are all the links to her books and her podcasts. And I know that I'm going to be on her podcast where we've just got that scheduled. And so I'll make sure to also promote and share her podcast episode with me on it. And thank you again.
Thank you, Mariah.
Mhm.